Hi everyone, my name is Stavros and welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a book review on Katabasis by RF Kuang. I've never read any dark academia before and I've always been interested in the genre, so I was really excited to hear that Katabasis was coming out because I've also heard a lot of really good things about RF Kuang. So when I heard that this was coming out, I thought it would be a really great opportunity to jump in to dark academia, try one of RF Kuang's works, and just really see how I vibe with this genre a little bit. I also will admit that I got kind of a bit sucked into the pre-order special. This book is just gorgeous. You can see here the pages that are all done up and painted as well. And so I pre-ordered the book and got it at the end of August, and I've been reading it ever since. It also helped that I was really excited that a lot of my friends were also reading this book as well. So it was kind of like a really fun thing to experience all together. Jumping right into the spoiler-free thoughts here, I really wanted to like this book, but my excitement faded really quickly as I started to read. The book just made it more and more difficult as I read to really enjoy the book. Right from the start, the main character, Alice, I found her to be incredibly unlikable, and I just really had a lot of trouble connecting with her as a protagonist, as a main character. And right from the start of the story, you're jumping right into hell. The characters are jumping right to hell. If you've heard the pitch for this story, it's effectively pitched as two PhD students travel to hell to save their supervisor's soul. And I kind of thought there'd be some lead up to what's going on in the story, but right away from chapter 1, we are jumping straight to hell and we're kind of jumping right into it. So I had a lot of questions right at the start of the book and not a lot of answers. I was kind of forewarned that in dark academia, that apparently happens a lot, where you're questioning a lot of things, you don't have a lot of answers to a lot of things, and there's a really slow rollout of information by some friends of mine who are really into dark academia. So I was kind of expecting that, but it was still a bit difficult going in, and I was really wanting to give this book a fair shot. And so I was kind of going into it with a bit of an open mind and waiting to see what the answers were and to kind of figure it out as I went. That being said, I was finding it really difficult to get invested in this story. And honestly, for about the first 200 pages, I was really just pushing my way through, trying to give it the benefit of the doubt, trying to see what was going on. And I really didn't get invested in and start being interested until around the 200 page mark, which is far too long for a 550 page book, almost halfway through, to start feeling like I was actually caring about what was going on, even a little bit. It took way too long for me to start feeling invested in the story. One thing I will say is that RF Kuang's writing is really, really nice. It's super straightforward and easy to read, and I think that was a large part of why I was able to get through to that point. I think if the writing hadn't been good enough, I would have at some point just DNF'd the book and stopped reading it. But I was really kind of committed to giving Katabasis and just dark academia a fair shot, and so I really wanted to kind of see how this worked out. And like I said, it helped that RF Kuang's writing was really easy to read, so it was kind of a good way to go about that in that way. But I will say that it was tough to get 200 pages into a book and really feel like it was just tough to read and it was a chore to read. So that was a really difficult thing. I really wish that we had gotten to things a bit sooner in the book. There's a lot more I want to talk about that I'll get onto in the spoiler section in just a second here, but to kind of wrap up these spoiler-free thoughts, I thought Katabasis was far too long. I think that it could have been cut down a lot. There was a lot of fluff and unnecessary things in this story for me, and the actual story itself just didn't feel justified or warranted. I just could not find a way to feel invested or like I agreed with any of the decisions that the characters were making, and so it was really difficult to get invested in the story. And I will say it had a pretty satisfying ending, but the ending itself, for me, did not justify or make up for the rest of the story. Okay, jumping into the spoiler thoughts now, some spoiler-filled thoughts about Katabasis. I mentioned at the start that I found Alice to be a pretty unlikable character, and sometimes you can really find that you can grow attached or like unlikable characters in their own way. I just found that I really couldn't empathize with Alice in a lot of different ways. I empathize with the struggles that she had, and I don't love what she went through. I'm really sorry that she went through those things. But just as a character, I could not find myself attaching to her or the decisions that she was making. And honestly, ultimately, I do not think that I very much liked this book. It was just far too long. And if I could boil it down to a couple different things, I think that one, the initial part of the book when they're kind of journeying through the first couple of courts of hell, I just found to be so tedious and boring to read through. And honestly, I think could have entirely been cut out of the story. I don't think they served a lot of purpose to the story. There was just a lot of filler, it felt, in those sections. And I felt myself being completely uninvested in that part of the story. I really wanted to know why they were in hell and what their plan was. How did they plan to get Professor Grimes back? Like, these are questions that I had that I was wanting to know. And I felt like instead I had to sit through just so much nonsense. And I guess what was happening is it's kind of some world building about this is what hell looks like in this world, but it really felt forced in a lot of different ways to me. It felt like here's just a bunch of philosophical information and just yeah, nonsense that really, to me, like I was like, this does not affect the plot in any way. What's going on? I want to know answers to this, and I just wasn't getting those answers. So that was really tough to kind of go through in a lot of ways. And then again, a lot of things that just felt forced, like when Alice reads through Peter's notes and is like, oh my god, Peter's gonna kill me, and just jumps to this conclusion. When she's known Peter for a long time, it doesn't sound like anything that he would do, but just decides, I'm not going to talk to him about it, I'm not going to even question this, and just goes with this in mind. And there's a lot of things like that that really felt to me like forced. Like I was like, why don't you guys just have a conversation? Why don't you just talk? It was really tough. And we find out, I guess, a little bit later some reasoning as to maybe why they weren't having as much conversation and some dialogue. But again, it just did not feel justified to me that they weren't able to have these conversations. So that was, I think, the first thing. Just that first section, which, like I said, is about that first 200 pages of the book, was just so boring and unneeded and did not, in my opinion, help the story in any way. To me, this story really started to shine around, like I said, that 200-page mark, when we actually started to have conversation and dialogue between Peter and Alice. I felt like that relationship was really what drove the story forward. It was just a real shame that that didn't really start happening until about 200 pages into the story. But once that started happening, I actually started to feel like I was getting invested a bit more and actually interested in the characters and what was going on. That's also around when we meet Elspeth, and she was a super cool character. We start learning about the crypt keys. We also start learning about how Professor Grimes tattooed this chalk into Alice's skin in order for her to not be able to forget anything. So a lot of like really cool and interesting things started to happen around that 200-page mark that started to kind of reignite my interest in the story. But again, it happened 200 pages in, so it was far too long for that kind of stuff to happen. And up until that point, it was almost feeling like a chore to start reading the book and get further on into the story. And even within that section, when I was feeling more interested, there were still a lot of things that were happening that I felt were scummy things for people to do, especially Alice and Peter, and Alice kind of convincing Peter to turn on Elspeth, somebody who just saved their life, who literally just saved their life in hell, and they just turn on her and backstab her and try and steal this stuff from her that she's been working so hard to try and get. And there's things like that that I was like, these are just not good people that they're making these decisions. They're just not good people to do this. And so that was, again, frustrating to try and see that kind of stuff happening. And it just was making it more and more difficult to feel invested, or rather to feel like I understood or liked the characters in that way. And shortly after this, we start to get more information about why they're actually in hell and kind of the different things that have happened when they get trapped in the trap that the crypt keys have placed for them. And they're having all these conversations. We're learning more about their past. We're learning more about Alice, more about Peter. And it hurt so much to read about how Alice was assaulted in that way. And I felt so bad for her. Learning about Peter's disabilities and how he's been sick and all these things. They were just so sad, such heart-wrenching stories to kind of read about and learn about these characters in that way. But then reading that and then thinking back to, wait a second, these people are down in hell to save this person who has assaulted one of them, who has stolen the other's research, and has just all in all just been a horrible, horrible human being. And you're down in hell to save this person, and you've given away half of your natural lifespan in order to do this. And I think that to me was one of the most frustrating things, is that it was so heavily reinforced at the beginning of the story that we've given away half of our lifespan. It was kind of shoved in your face so much, half the lifespan. And then to find this out, you've given away half of your lifespan to save this horrible creep. I could not compute it in my brain. It made absolutely zero sense for me. It already made very little sense. And then finding all this other extra stuff out, I was like, how? How could you have possibly made this decision to go and do this thing? Even when you find out that Alice's whole plan was to basically take Professor Grimes back and make him like this husk of a person that she could just control and effectively torture for the rest of his life, it still did not justify it for me. I mean, I don't know. I've never been in this position to try and figure this out, but I can just not justify giving away half of your natural lifespan for this kind of thing. It was just a decision that made absolutely no sense to me for either of them to make, for these supposedly very smart people to make. And so just the whole premise of being in hell and coming down to save their instructor, I was having trouble getting on board with the idea, and then finding this out, I was just completely not on board anymore. I was like, why would you guys have done this? Why would you make this decision? So that for me was one of the biggest moments where I felt like I just could not get on board with this story. I could not understand the characters. They were clearly very different than anything that I could have ever done or ever have decided to do. And so it was really tough to read that. And I felt so bad for Alice. I felt so bad for Peter. But then to make this decision, it just really did not make sense to me at all. And then kind of wrapping up that trapped moment when Peter helps Alice escape and she runs off, and then supposedly Peter dies in the trap. I just never believed that he was actually dead. For the rest of the story, up until the last final moment, I just did not think that Peter was actually dead. And so then, at the end of the story, when we find out that, oh, he actually did die, I just felt like it was not impactful for me. That scene, and Alice keeps on repeating that, oh, because Peter's dead, but because we never actually saw his death, it really played out to me such as, like, don't worry, Peter's not actually dead, he'll come back later. And so then, when eventually he did come back later, and Alice pulled off this big maneuver and used Peter's swell to swap Professor Grimes and him and bring him back to life. It was a really smart move and a kind of satisfying play by Alice to do right at the end of the story there, but I didn't feel like I felt the emotions that I could have felt if I had actually believed at all that Peter was actually gone. I just didn't believe it at all. The entire time, the entire rest of the story after he supposedly died, I was just like, oh, he's going to come back. Don't worry, he'll be around the corner here, he's going to come back. And I just never really believed it. And so then, finding out at the end that he actually had died, the whole thing just felt anticlimactic to me. I just felt like, oh, so he did actually die, okay, but didn't feel like he did. It just didn't feel real. And I think that if we had actually seen him die, or that scene had played out a little bit differently, and I actually had believed that he had died, then Alice pulling off this maneuver right at the end of the story would have felt really satisfying to see her do. But because I never actually believed it, it just felt like, oh, okay, this is how he comes back. Okay, sure, I guess, whatever. It just didn't feel that catharsis that I could have felt if I had actually believed that he was dead at any point in the story. I think the last thing I'll kind of say before kind of concluding my thoughts is that, again, after Peter dies, even though I didn't think he had died, when Alice is all alone again, I just felt like the story again was getting dull. And I realized that really the crux of the story, where I was actually enjoying the story, is the relationship between Peter and Alice. That was when the story was actually interesting and worth reading. And every time that they were on their own, it just felt so boring. This whole kind of concluding section of the story, again, just so many bits that could have been completely cut from the story and it wouldn't have mattered at all. When she gets to the final, the 8th court of hell, it's just so useless to the story. She meets this brand new character that we're suddenly supposed to care about when we've never heard about him before. I don't even remember his name. It was so boring to read this section of the story. And then she has this big confrontation with the Crypt Keys. And it could have been such a good scene, but it felt dragged on and rushed at the same time. She's having this big confrontation, and she picks up Theophrastus, the Crypt Keys kid, and she thinks, oh, I'm not going to throw this kid over the side into the Lathe River because he's just this innocent kid, so I'm just going to put him here. I was like, Alice, these people are here to kill you. They've been in hell for 15, 30 years, and they've just been killing anything that comes into hell and just terrorizing things. You don't need to be nice to these people. Why are you being nice now? You've not been nice at all the entire rest of the story. Now you're going to be nice to these killers in hell that are here to literally kill you? I could not wrap my head around it. It was so hard to feel anything for Alice in these moments when she was just making decisions that I could not comprehend in my mind. She's in life and death situations, and now she's choosing to be nice. She's giving away half her lifespan for this person who assaulted her. I just could not wrap my head around the decisions that she was making. Overall, I did not like this book. It clearly was not for me. I could not get behind the story. I could not get behind the actions of the characters, and most of the story I didn't even like the characters very much. It could have been significantly shorter, and the story would have really not been affected very much. It was just a really tough read for me. I would give Katabasis a 2 out of 5 stars. I am not writing off Dark Academia. I'm going to try some of the Dark Academia books in the future. I'm not even writing off RF Kuang because I really enjoyed her writing. Her writing in Katabasis is really straightforward, and I'm kind of excited to read something else of hers that I actually care about the story a bit more. But it was just clear that this book and this story was just not for me. What do you think? Did you like Katabasis? I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about the book in the comments below. I'd be happy to have a conversation about it because I feel like this would really be up some people's alley, and I'm just really curious to hear the people that did like it, what they liked about it, and just curious to have a conversation about it in the comments below. And until next time,